Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 698 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today's show is going to be slightly different. Jenny and I are discussing the next series that's coming up on the podcast. The series is going to be called Bold Beginnings, and it's based on listener feedback. In this episode, you're going to hear me tell Jenny the idea that I had, explain to her about the feedback that I got from the audience, and then we take the big ideas from the feedback, almost like bullet points. We go over them, put them in an order we want to record in, and talk about them as we go. So basically, you're going to listen to a meeting that Jenny and I had about the next series of the podcast. But think of it more like a trailer, an extended trailer for a new series. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by InPen from Medtronic Diabetes. Find out more and get started today with the InPen at inpentoday.com. The podcast is also sponsored by US Med. US Med is a place where you can get your diabetes supplies, and US Med wants you to have better service and better care than you're accustomed to. Get yourself a free benefits check right now at usmed.com/juicebox or by calling 888-721-1514. If you're a U.S. resident who has type 1 diabetes or is the caregiver of someone with type 1, please go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Join the registry, take the survey. It will take you fewer than 10 minutes. When you do this, when you complete the survey, you'll be helping people with type 1 diabetes and supporting the Juicebox Podcast. The survey is fast. It's easy. There's nothing on there you don't know the answer to. It's HIPAA compliant and absolutely anonymous. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. I have an idea for today. So,
okay.
So we're recording already. So if you say no, it's fine. We'll just not do it. But
Okay.
I don't think you're going to say no.
I usually don't.
Well, yes, you don't usually. So far, you haven't said no. I've said some weird things once or twice. You've been okay with it. So I had this idea a couple of months ago, and I kept thinking, again, the private Facebook group is just a font of information because you can see what people are thinking, right?
Sure.
And then eventually, if you see people think the same thing over and over and over again, you think to yourself, well, this must be a question a lot of people have. So I put this question out and I said, what do you wish you would have known at diagnosis? And what I got back turned out to be an 80-page Word document full of information. Now, Isabel has gone through and she's taken out like duplicate questions and things like that.
That's what I was going to ask. How much was duplicate?
Not as much as you would think when you hear 80 pages, but a fair amount was duplicate stuff. And she broke it down into sections, like put people's questions into, under headers. And I was thinking that we should do individual episodes based on those headers.
Sure.
And then combine the episodes together in a series. I don't know what I'll call it yet, but it'll be something about questions that newly diagnosed people have, like frequently asked questions of newly diagnosed type 1s or something like that.
Yeah. I'm curious since you've read through all 80 pages, or you were like, oh, this is 80 pages. That's a lot of stuff.
I've been making my way through section by section.
Because I'm curious if some of the questions are, gosh, I really would have liked to know this, because definitely right up front, this would have been super, super duper beneficial. Whereas some questions maybe well, gosh, this would have been nice to know up front, but it's a little bit more, I know you say like ninja level, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit more down the road. Definitely you would use this, but you're not going to use this 2 days from diagnosis.
And see, the way you're thinking about it is the way I was thinking about it. And so what I thought was, if we take each header and almost handle it like it's an Ask Scott and Jenny episode.
Sure.
Right. And then and then go through them, have conversations. Why does my voice break only with you? It might be because we're on Mondays.
That could be. I was actually going to say, if my voice today is very scratchy, I actually canceled clients like 2 days last week because I had laryngitis.
No kidding. Oh, well, I don't want you to have
talk.
You could have canceled me. You could.
No. I think I'm definitely better. My voice is not like weird, not there for 5 minutes. Right. So yeah.
So what I kind of thought was, and this is good for your situation, is I just want to talk through the document with you, but we're gonna record it. So I sent you an email, which will open up into your Apple Notes.
Okay. Let's see. We'll go to my email and see where your email is.
I just think that conversationally is the only way to work through all this. Because otherwise, what most people would do who are creating content for diabetes, they'd read these, they'd choose a handful of questions, and they turn it into some bulleted point list, and they'd put 2 sentences after each one. But I think that when we're talking about it, the length of time that we decide to talk about a question usually is pretty accurate to answering the question. So some of these,
for the most part,
I mean, I think we do a good job of seeing the big picture when we hear people's questions, I guess is what I'm saying. So, do you have my email?
I don't.
Really?
No.
Hold on a second.
Do you not talk a lot on weekends? Is that why you were saying that maybe it's because it's Mondays that your voice cracks a lot?
I don't talk as much over the weekend. My wife would disagree with that, I imagine, but I don't think I do. Not nearly as much as, I record this show. The last couple months have been crazy. I've been recording like 5 times a week. So I talk
a lot.
Yeah. And then I put ads on things. I probably sit and talk directly for 10 hours a week, just like constantly talking. There are times when my throat feels sore and it's unpleasant. Okay. Did the text?
I'm right there with you. I talk all week as well. I know. Sometimes at the end of my like really long days, which are Mondays and Fridays, I get done. I have to like take a couple breaths before I like walk out of my office space, because 2 children, like they just, and they want like, Mom, now can I talk to you? And, kids my age have no inner monologue whatsoever. Yeah. And it just all comes out. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Not now.
Mommy needs quiet time and a bubble bath.
I'm in a mode right now. If you want to know how to pre-bolus a bagel, that's all I could tell you at this moment. Does your head get swimmy afterwards? Yes. Mine does. Yeah. Too. If I sit down and do a talk like for hours, or even when I'm like, one of the reasons I don't like people to look at me when I'm recording with them is because I stare at a spot on the desk while I'm accessing what I understand about diabetes. Like, and I just, like I talk.
It's like plugging yourself into a file, right?
Yeah.
Here's my file. I'm going to connect to it. I download everything I need for this circumstance, and then you unplug.
Yeah. I do wonder if people don't understand, like people who don't do this would understand that. It's just, there's a I don't know, a lake, a dammed off lake full of information in my head. And if you get me to open it up, I can just let it out. But if you ask me right off the cuff, I'd be like, oh, hold on a second. So you're saying if this happened, but once I start talking about it, it just comes out smoothly. So, and yes. I don't know why that is. Right.
And that's kind of sometimes the reason that I get a little bit thrown off when people who are not in my diabetes world, whether it's friends with diabetes or people I'm working with or colleagues like you or whatever, the general public without diabetes, when they ask you these very random questions, I have to be very careful about how I start talking about something. Because like you said, I will go off. Mm-hmm. And then you get the glassy eye look, like deer in the headlights, like this really, I didn't want all this information, and I feel like you're speaking like alien language to me,
yeah,
right?
It's not worth it. I find in that scenario, my explanations are so childish and simple that if the next thing I said to them was, I have a very popular podcast about diabetes, they'd think, I wonder why. Because I'm like, oh yeah, she's fine. Yeah.
Right.
Hasn't outgrown it yet.
Right. Yep.
That's not, you know what, forget it. Like,
right.
So it's just, I don't know. I don't get too deep in it otherwise. And just like you're saying, I'll just start to talk.
Right.
And then,
when I get going,
yeah,
it's hard to like find the end point. Right.
Yeah. No, because the explanation, and I think, to bring it back around to this, is the explanation is always conversational. I'm starting to believe that that's sort of why it's harder for doctors because they're in that, they fall in that same category as a person writing a blog about it, which is, I have about 350 words here before I lose people and I run out of time or whatever the reason. I got to get it out. I got to get it out succinctly. And this stuff's not, generally speaking, not cut and dry. No, you need the big conversation. So,
well, and I think that's why the conversational learning, as you do, is very helpful to many people, because they're already in the realm of something that they are trying to understand, or they understand because they're living it. When you're trying to have a conversation with somebody who doesn't live in the diabetes world and or has no connection from family or a friend or whatever, the conversation becomes very one-sided. You become, whether you wanted to or not, you become the educator.
Right.
And then it's less of a conversation and more of a tutorial. And
yeah,
it's not a fun conversation.
Right. No. And the self-editing that happens, whether it's by the doctor or someone writing a blog, is, you get to a point and you go, oh, I don't want to tell them that because they might misunderstand. Right. Or, I wouldn't want anybody's blood sugar to get too, to think, I don't want anybody's blood sugar to get too low. The way I think of that specific thing is, people's blood sugars get too low all over the world using insulin. Most of them don't know who I am and will never hear this podcast, right? But if we give them enough information, they maybe could stop it from happening. And I would prefer for them to have a chance than to not have a chance. It almost feels like it feels like an action movie to me. Like, we've got to jump over this lava. If we don't, the monster's going to eat us.
Right.
Well, we might as well jump and see what happens. Right. Maybe we'll make it over the lava. And that's sort of how I think about this. Like, you should have the opportunity to succeed. It's not going to work out right for everyone, or it might take longer or shorter for some people, but not telling everybody so that some people don't fall into the lava doesn't make sense to me, because everyone's going to get eaten by the monster.
Correct.
So that's just.
And at some point, somebody's going to be ready enough to jump. Maybe they weren't when you first gave them the information, but if you gave it to them, at some point, they're likely going to try to use some tidbit that you provided. Right.
They'll have this recollection. They'll think, oh, I listened to this. Like, again, I swear I didn't bring this up on purpose, but this idea of talking about these people's questions after being newly diagnosed, you can listen to these, and maybe 3 months from now, you'll say to yourself, oh, I remember someone said that in this thing. I could go back and look again. I could maybe just go with my recollection. But isn't that better than them being blindsided by it? Another great example, I think, is that this morning in the Facebook page, someone's kid had a seizure. Their Dexcom was, I don't know if it was if it was starting up. They didn't have access to their Dexcom data for a little while. Kid had a seizure. She grabbed the Gvoke HypoPen. She stopped the seizure. She took the kid to the hospital. He's recuperating now. My point is that she did it. Like you should see her recollection of it.
Because she had the information about what to do.
Yeah, it's not this harried, like, it's not this Scarlett O'Hara post where she's like, the world's happening to me again, come. Right. She's not asking for prayers. She's like saying, look, this thing happened. It sucked. And we took care of it. And here he is. He's fine. And
right.
and I thought, I was proud of that. Like, I wish it wouldn't have happened to the kid, but I mean, as a person whose child's had a seizure, it can happen, you know?
It can happen, right? And I think another thing that you bring in there without really saying it is that in this circumstance, the parent didn't get emotional. The parent was rational. They said, this is what's happening. This is what I have to do about it. And this is the next step.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do. I mean, if I had a t-shirt that said anything, it would be calm and think like Spock. Yeah. It would. Like, seriously, if you just, all of these things that you learn along the way, many of them are very just rational, do it decision.
Right.
Don't put emotion into it, because despite there being feelings about diabetes and how cruddy it can be to manage things at times and whatever, a lot of it's decision that is, right now, this is what I have to do. And
someone brought it up to me recently, and I'm going to have to look into it more because it keeps popping back into my head. They talked about thinking like an astronaut, because everything that an astronaut comes up to is trying to kill them, right? So when everything that you put it in order, like, this one's going to get me first, we'll take care of this, then that one, then that one. Is the 7th thing, the 70th thing on that list going to kill me? It might. But
if I clear up 1 through 69, it might not.
It might not. And maybe something will change or whatever. And I don't know. I think about life that way, honestly, not just diabetes. So, you know, whatever's our most emergent problem, it took me years to explain to my wife that my to-do list was fluid. Like, she would write she'd write a to-do list. She'd be like, you didn't do number 1 yet. I'd be like, well, number 6 is on fire. So I can't get 1 through 5 done before 6 burns the house down. I'm going to have to move the list around a little bit. It's one of the reasons I enjoy making the podcast by myself, and not because people are like, you could get an assistant, or you should do this, or what about an editor? And I was like, I don't know. I like the way I think about it, you know? So anyway, did you get my text? 20 minutes
I did.
later? Oh,
yes, it's right here. I thought I said, yes, it came through perfectly fine.
I was enjoying our conversation.
It's probably the longest text message that I have in, but I should say it's the longest texted note that I have in my notes.
Did it open in your notes?
Yes.
Okay.
It opened in my notes now. Yes. It's all good.
Well, trust me, it's the longest one I've ever seen either. So scrolling through it, she's got it broken down to carb guidelines and impact of food. This is Isabel who took care of this.
Which is a pretty long list.
It is. Then there's stacking, range, food choices, pre-bolusing, the 15-15 rule, fear of insulin highs and lows. Isabel, you did such a nice job with this. Honeymoon, terminology, flexibility, guilt, fears, and hope expectations. And I'm still scrolling. Wow, that's a long one. About the podcast and the community around the podcast. Medical team. Holy Hannah. Technology and diabetes supplies. Jenny, I'm going to need you to quit your job so we can do this.
And insurance.
And insurance. Long-acting insulin. Exercise. Journaling. That's interesting. School. Being diagnosed as an adult. Family. Extra topics. And then stuff that she's
wasn't relevant.
Weeded out that she didn't find would be relevant to this idea.
Or maybe they didn't fit into a category. So, I mean, they might be things that we can look through and see if they're...
Yeah. And the rest, we'll call that at some point if we get to it.
So now my brain, like I did when we first did the pro tips,
go ahead.
It's like we need to rearrange this listing, right? I would probably go through this and list them out according to what I think would be really important first, newly diagnosed, really go here first, and then next here and next here kinds of things.
Oh, I was hoping you would think about it, honestly.
I mean, things like a medical team and...
You order diabetes supplies. And if you're like me, you may have been using a place that made you want to reach up with your hands and grab your hair and yank it right out of your head because it was very frustrating. Or they'd say things like, we'll contact your doctor. You don't have to worry about it. And then you had to worry about it because they never contacted your doctor. If this sounds familiar and you're tired of that, I almost said crap, but now I said it anyway. So if you're tired of that, I suggest you check out US Med. US Med accepts Medicare nationwide and over 800 private insurers. They carry everything from your insulin pumps to diabetes testing supplies and the latest CGMs. They always provide you with 90 days worth of supplies, and they have fast and free shipping. US Med likes to say that they want you to have better service and better care than you're accustomed to today. Why not give US Med a shot? They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, and they've served over 1 million diabetes customers since 1996. usmed.com/juicebox. That's the place you get your free benefits check. You could also do it at 888-721-1514. Get yourself some white glove treatment instead of that treatment that you're accustomed to. Oh, we'll call your doctor for you. Take care of the whole thing. There's nothing for you to think about. Bull. You know what I mean. usmed.com/juicebox. Podcast is also sponsored today by InPen from Medtronic Diabetes. You might want to know more about it. And if you do want to know more, you're in luck because good old Scott is here to tell you about it. The InPen is a pen. It's an insulin pen. I thought that was, it's an insulin pen. It's an insulin pen, but it's so much more because it connects to an app on your phone. This app gives you access to a dosing calculator, dosing reminders, carb counting support, a digital logbook, many of the features that people with insulin pumps get. So if you're looking for some of the features that you can get with an insulin pump, like, how much insulin is active in your system, if that's something you want, you should look into the InPen. There's also an offer on the InPen. Now, you have to have... let me just say, I'll read it to you instead of me just fumbling through the words. This offer is available to people with commercial insurance and terms and conditions apply, right? But you may be able to pay as little as $35 for an InPen, which is crazy. Medtronic Diabetes does not want cost to be a roadblock to you getting access to the therapy you need. So go check out InPentoday.com. A great device. I think you're going to really enjoy it. There's not much to lose here, so go ahead and check it out. There are links in the show notes of your podcast player and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to InPen, US Med, and all of the sponsors, including a link to where you can take the survey for the T1D exchange. Check it out, please. Support the sponsors. When you do, you're supporting the show. I really appreciate it. I'm going to get you back now to my conversation with Jenny as we talk about bold beginnings. InPen requires a prescription and settings from your healthcare provider. You must use proper settings and follow the instructions as directed, or you could experience high or low glucose levels. For more safety information, visit InPentoday.com.
Maybe even food choices before, like the carbs and the carb effect kind of thing. I think that the 15-15 rule could definitely go along with the lows and the highs. They could be kind of included together. Gosh, there's so much in here. Honeymoon definitely up at the top. I think that honeymoon is really poorly explained from the get-go.
Okay.
And it's almost like a skirted over sort of comment that's not explained very well. And so people get lost in whether it's going to happen or it's happening or how to know it's happening or what to do about it. And you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's do this together now.
Okay.
Okay. So you tell me and I'll put them up at the top.
Well, I would definitely say honeymooning would be a good first.
Okay.
Because that's going to, for the most part, within a very quick time post-diagnosis, if honeymoon is going to happen, that's where it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So that would be probably first. And then I'm kind of curious, terminology is almost like the defining diabetes, right? So terminology, these are really good, maybe just the ones specifically post-diagnosis that would be very important to have information about. So I would say right along with honeymooning, the terminology.
Okay. I have it there. I'm putting them in your order.
And then, I don't know, I'm kind of like the medical team, I think could maybe be last before we move into like a little bit deeper. But I'm wondering like the highs and lows, especially because there's a fair amount in the fears around highs and lows. Mm-hmm. And then specifically the 15-15 rule. I don't know how many people post-diagnosis I get to talk to who specifically ask about that. So clearly this rule is still being taught.
Yeah, exactly. And it becomes obvious to people pretty quickly that it doesn't make sense. And then they get stuck.
Frustrated.
Yeah. Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely say that. I think right along with there's one about insulin in here. And I think it might even be able to be included around fear of insulin is the pre-bolusing. And the reason I put it in there is I think because from the get-go, if people aren't taught about timing, you do start to fear insulin.
Yeah, because it seems erratic.
It's erratic, exactly. So I would say, within that 15-15 rule, the fear of insulin, lows and highs, explanation of insulin, and then moving into pre-bolusing. And I think pre-bolusing could then move more so into, I'm wondering, like carb impact, because they kind of go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. There are so many categories here.
Yeah.
It's like hard to. What about stacking?
Well, stacking is going to be.
I mean, that kind of goes along with fear of insulin.
It goes along with everything. It goes along with 15-15. It goes along with fear of insulin, pre-bolusing. You ever have somebody ask you, I had dinner and I pre-bolused and then I had seconds. What should I do? And it's fascinating. Yes. They're stuck. They're like, I'd never had a meal inside of a meal before. What goes on?
Right.
I can't just bolus again. And it's funny because in my mind, I'm like, well, you're taking in more carbs. Why not? And then I think that what they think is, well, that's so much insulin. And I just put insulin in. They might be thinking about stacking without ever having been told the word. Because it seems like too much to them.
And I think the real definition of stacking too in there, or a better definition of stacking, because what you're talking about in a way, it's stacking, but it's not stacking without purpose.
Right.
Everything that you eat is going to require insulin.
Right.
And it goes back to the timing of the insulin. And also now that we have wonderful technology like a CGM, what's your CGM telling you?
Yeah.
Are you stable? Are you already rising? Are you falling? Are you low falling? Mm-hmm. Right? So
this lady posted a graph the other day, and it was a 12-hour graph. It was beautiful. And there was like, I don't know, she took the kid out for waffles and ice cream or something like that in there. And she said something like that her child had like 250 carbs in this giant, like, food orgy.
Wow.
Yeah, right. And
that's a lot of food. Holy cow.
Yeah, right. I was like, wow, no kidding. But you should have saw the line. And it was so flat. And then everybody comes in and their first thought is, that's so many carbs. That's so much insulin. How much insulin was? It's a smaller kid, right? And she says it was over time, I think 17 units she used over The kid didn't like hork
hours.
down. Yeah. This happened in like stages over a couple of hours. And I chuckled to myself when I read it, because if Arden has a carb heavy meal, she could use 17 units for a meal. And
sure,
it's a lot. Like, I'm not saying it's not, but it's not a lot for that food. It was interesting that their first thing isn't, wow, you did that. How can I do that? It was back to their preconceived notions about things. That seems like a lot of carbs. That seems like a lot of insulin. It seems like, and that's all relative to begin with. 17 units. I mean, listen, if you had, if you had type 1 and you weighed 350 pounds, you might be using 17 units to move a number. Like it's
correct.
Like there's all different reasons why the numbers should be, the numbers are what they are. If Arden goes out, has nachos with cheesesteak on it and French fries, we're somewhere near 17 to 20 units. It's, because for the fat and everything, there's a lot,
I don't think I've ever taken a 17 unit bowl in my life.
Yeah. Well, Jenny, you eat like a healthy bird.
Well, I don't know. Even growing up, though, I had definite high insulin needs as a teen.
Sure.
All teens do. But yeah, I don't, and maybe it was more just from the standpoint that I also started in a very different school of thought and education than we have today.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to my mom's on Saturday with my boys just for an early Mother's Day.
Right.
And she's been trying to like do some cleaning and whatnot. And so, for my brother and I, she kept really organized files, like every report card we ever had, all of these things. Well, I found in there a scrapbook that I had at some point put together after my diagnosis with all of my cards, all of my Mylar balloons, like taped into this scrapbook and everything. And I found 3 of my hospital menus with my choices during that week.
You kept all of that.
Well, I didn't. My mother did.
She kept all of that. Okay.
This is my mom. Yes, this is what she does.
Your mom might like Kelly.
Yes. But it was amazing to me in terms of this, that I had a very structured plan that was based on portions and the insulin that went along with it.
Sure.
There wasn't as much variety or variability. And that's just not how my mom did it either. Yeah. I'm sure other people probably at that time may have. It's just everything was very structured. And
it makes sense.
It was.
And the technology wasn't there to track anything. You did. I mean, if you tried to eat 250 carbs back then, you would have been high. I don't see another way around.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Your blood sugar would have been high forever. I think that's why some of the old timey type 1s in the group see that and it fries their mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you can't do that is always their, I wish the internet was audio because I think you can't do that in typing, typed out doesn't mean the same thing as how it would sound. Like, it sounds like a direction typed out. You can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. What I think they really mean is, holy hell, you can't do that.
You can't do that. Yeah. Right. Yes.
That's not going to work. But I mean, it does. It does, right. So.
And again, it goes along with timing of insulin and when to put it in and what you're seeing. Again, our technology today allows you to do some of these types of things as long as you're paying attention.
Yeah. Right. So, all right. So stacking fits in there. So right now I have honeymooning terminology, highs, lows, 15-15 rule, fear of insulin, lows and highs, pre-bolusing, carb impact, stacking.
And then I think I would put, do we put food choices somewhere in there?
Not yet. Sort of has to go before pre-bolusing, doesn't it?
Pre-bolusing, yeah. Okay. I would put it in definitely before pre-bolusing.
Okay.
And then I'm wondering if, I was just reading range. I'm assuming we're talking about glucose ranges here.
Let me look. Excellent. Make sure I see it the way you say it.
Maybe.
What range to be at or shoot for? How being 200 for weeks is okay as the body adjusts, but to taper down to more realistic and healthy range. That it may take a while to normalize blood sugars that have been abnormal.
So it's kind of a broad.
It is. Yeah.
I would probably break it down to range based on what's considered healthy range, what's considered a normal range outside of having diabetes. What does the human body typically aim for? Mm-hmm. And then I would move into range that might even include things like safe ranges for activity and safe ranges for illness and range that you might hear from your medical providers versus what you're really trying to aim for. Mm-hmm. Along with where should your glucose be? What should your target be? Fasting first thing in the morning. What should it be, or what should you expect after meals? All those things I think fit within range.
Yeah. Well, we could do it as one episode and just mm-hmm. and break it up within the episode, right?
Yes. And I think I'd move into then definitely maybe even terminology. And there's one in here that's about, I think, the medical care team, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think they all in a way go together. A medical care team in terms of ranges alone they're going to have a very similar range for everybody. They're just going to give you their blanket statement. You should be here. You should set your alarms here.
Yeah. They're going to say whatever the ADA said last, right?
For the most part, yeah. Yes.
70 to 180 right now. Is that the numbers?
That's the numbers right now. I mean, even most of the CGMs have that set as their default mm-hmm. in terms of data collection, 70 to 180, unless you go into your own settings and actually physically adjust them to see your cumulative information that's scaled to your target range. Mm-hmm. And again, a lot of people don't even realize that they can do that within their, software data analysis like Clarity or whatnot. But then even discussing within the medical kind of piece, how to pick a medical team, how to ask questions within the medical team. I mean, I'm assuming some of these are the questions within that medical.
So what if we put these in order, which we're doing now, mm-hmm. and after we have it in order, then I will apply a topic to every one of our recording dates coming up.
Perfect.
And then we can be read ahead and then just sit down when it's time to record and have the conversation. Awesome. We'll plan, Jenny. What do you think of that?
That's a great idea. Yes.
Listen, I'm going to tell you right now.
Which we don't usually ever, in fact, we never do. I never know what we're talking about until we click in together and I'm like, good morning. And you're like, let's talk about this today.
I'm going to tell you right now that one of the things about the Pro Tip series that I'm most proud of is just that it really is. I mean, we made a bullet pointed list and then we said the topic out loud and then did what we did. And it's been so valuable for people. Yes. I think this is going to do something similar. Now, here's a question for you. This is more of a podcast question, but I'm interested in your opinion. Do we just make this part of the Pro Tip series? Like, remember I said I wanted to go back and revisit the Pro Tip episodes?
Right.
Maybe this is going to do that.
It may. Yeah. It may do enough of that. I think the Pro Tips I don't know what the longest Pro Tip episode was. Maybe an hour?
Yeah, there might be one that's more like hour 15 or something like that, but pretty close to that.
Because I think those were very, very specific. Mm-hmm. And while we talk and veer off and whatever within our conversations, I think if I were to do it, I might actually put this as a pro tip category, pro tips for newly diagnosed. Mm-hmm. And then put these all up definitely as pro tips, but these are the things within here. If you are newly diagnosed, go here. And if there are additional questions based on one specific topic, maybe go to the regular pro tips and look up
that. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do. That's a good idea. All right. So I'm still pulling topics and bringing them up top so that I can see them. So
I know there are a lot of them.
A lot. Yeah. Hold on a second. So, okay. So we have still flexibility, medical care team, guilt, fears, and hope expectations, podcast, community, family, school, journaling, exercise, long-acting insulin. I know that after the topics came back, so I eventually closed the thread, and I was like, okay,
this is enough.
I'm good, thanks. And it was very generous of people to come in and spend time, but giving real clear explanations of the things that were confusing to them or that they found helpful, etc.
Right.
And then I put it all into this Word document, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. So I didn't have time, and I thought, this is such an asset. I don't want to lose it, but I was like, I don't know what to do with this. And Isabel said, I'll go through it. And I said, thank you very much. And it took her weeks to
I'm sure. Yeah. This is a lot of information. 80 pages is no joke.
No. And so she went all through it, and I thought, it's a lot, and most people wouldn't put this effort into their content. And I think that's why it's going to be good,
Yeah.
So it's even why I'm not scared to discuss it here with you. I mean, honestly, this episode is going to serve as sort of like a primer to let people know it's coming. They probably won't hear this till we have a number of these recorded already. I'll probably put this one out first, get them ready that it's coming. But there's a voice in my head that says, don't let people hear you and Jenny talk about this, because they're going to rip you off, because that does happen, Jenny. I put up content, and then a week later, somebody else thought to talk about the same thing. Like, oh, wow, what a surprise. And, but I don't care, because I think first of all, I think the effort we'll put into it won't be matched by anyone else. And, the information, I would hold up against what anybody else could come up with. And the other thing is, I just don't think that I don't think people put this kind of effort into stuff. I just don't, even going all the way back to the pro tip series, like the amount of hours that we spent recording that stuff,
it's a lot.
Yeah. And we say this all the time, but you don't work for me. Like, you're not getting paid to do that. Like, where are you going to get somebody with your knowledge and your understanding of how to explain things and an ability to talk to me? Because you and I, like, we get along really well and we vibe off of each other, but we're not similar. Like, it just works,
Right. Yes.
And you're not going to get that. So I think we can do this. I think this will be terrific.
No, this is really great.
Yeah. Okay. So, does it repopulate when I move words? Do you see it happen right away?
I see it happen on my screen.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So you saw me misspell a word. That's embarrassing. Never mind.
Actually, I was going to ask you what you had the word long after exercise. And I was like, what else goes along with that? I don't know what long means. Time without insulin, long time.
I'm still trying to scroll to make sure we have them all. So, I mean, there it is, right? It's, let me make sure.
I think that's everything.
I'm going to go back down and go through it one more. Actually, you stay up there where the list is, and I'll scroll through and tell you what's here. You can tell me if we have it up top or not. Extra topics, I'm not worried about that right now. Is family up there?
Family is up there, yep.
Being diagnosed as an adult? I don't remember typing that.
That is not up there, no.
Can you add it?
Mm-hmm.
And we can rename these topics because, Isabel's first language isn't English.
Really?
Yeah, she's French.
That's, you did tell me.
Yeah. And I only said that so when she hears this, she'll be mad at me for saying that. School
is in there.
Journaling.
Yep.
Exercise.
Yes.
Long-acting insulin.
Yes.
Technology and diabetes supplies. That's not up there.
I can add that.
Okay. And then insurance, which I know I didn't put up there either.
Insurance. Too.
Yep. And then medical team. Yes.
Yes.
Did I add podcast and community?
Yes.
Okay. Wow, this topic's so long I can't get to the header. What is it going to be? I'm still scrolling.
I think the long one was...
It's guilt, fears, hope, and expectations. It's incredibly long.
That's here.
Okay. There's probably, the reason for that is likely going to be that there are a lot of personal anecdotes in here, which took people longer to type out. I'm going to assume.
I would expect so too. Yeah. And some of that, we'll go through these obviously ahead of time, but I would expect some of the things within that, especially the fears, may be addressed within the other topics.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I don't believe that we're going to have to go through these and read everyone's thoughts and answer them. I think the way I see this happening is that we prepare by reading them, make our own couple of notes, and then we can have a bigger conversation around that and interject people's thoughts when they build on everything. Flexibility is up there. Terminology is up there. Honeymoon is. Fear of insulin, lows and highs. 15-15, pre-bolusing. I'm getting close to the top. Food choices. Range, stacking, and carb guidelines, and impact of food. Carb impact. Yep.
Is carb guidelines an actual?
I think that's a topic. Yeah. All carbs.
Is it a topic?
Equal. Better education on how insulin works with specific food groups would have been beneficial. The hospital.
Because there's carb impact is.
Yeah.
Is that the heading?
Is that okay. Wait, hold on a second.
You typed it in here already.
I see what you're saying. You're saying it's possible that I shortened it and I should have wrote that. So I'm going to put that in there and I'll change that. Like that. Yeah, because this is really interesting. The hospital made it seem very black and white. You eat X carbs, you take this much insulin, and go on with your life. Another person said, impact of food, nutrition component on blood sugars. Why isn't her blood sugar tracking the same for breakfast day after day, even with meticulous carb counting? You're right. A lot of these are going to be able to we're going to be able to give an explanation and then point somebody to a different episode too.
Right.
Where they'll be able to be helped. Counting carbs was a huge stressor for us. Easy ways to count carbs and how different things hit you differently would have been great. Yeah. So basically these last three statements sort of say the same thing.
Right.
So, okay, great. But my point is that the luck of having such a large group of people, one of the things that's great about it is that this isn't just a random person saying something now. Like we have consensus.
This is a pool of if you were doing like a research project, you would have a lot of participants.
Yeah, right.
Your research wouldn't be N of 10, which then the general information about like a study like that is like, 10 people, great. But the world has how many billion people in it, right? And how many of them have diabetes? So how relevant is this? But this is a very good amount of people comments.
Right. No, I think this will be good. And then some people go into more detail. My biggest frustration is that at first they send you home and tell you that your child can only eat carbs during the 3 main meals. They talk about free snacks outside of it. So you spend hours researching free snacks and loads of money buying them. And then 2 weeks later in class, they say, oh, by the way, she can have carbs whenever she wants. Just dose for it. Here's your new chart. Even if they just said, we want you to wait a couple of weeks, but at this point we'll teach tricks. I see. Okay. Yeah, this is going to be good. All right. I'm excited. This is
cool.
This is what I was hoping would happen. You're up for it. So
yay.
Do we want to try to this last couple of minutes we have, do you want to try to put the rest of them in order or?
Sure.
All right.
Let's see. So we have order already for honeymoon terminology, highs, lows, kind of all the insulins sort of together. I think maybe within the insulin, we should also put probably, let's see, highs and lows, I think should also maybe be, where's range? Because highs and lows kind of go along with range.
Okay. So,
right. So maybe highs and lows and then range.
All right.
So it's all together.
Got it. I feel like guilt, fear, hope, expectations, podcasting community is last, like towards the end, maybe.
Correct.
Those things. So I'm going to chop those out and put them down lower, make some space here. I think flexibility is a huge part of it, to be honest. I honestly think your medical team is towards the end. Newly diagnosed people are not going to break away from a new medical team if it's a bad one. They're not going to even know right away.
Right.
So
correct.
Maybe put that more towards the end as well.
Agreed.
All right. And long-acting insulin could just, I don't know.
I think long-acting needs to be around around the fears of insulin, lows and highs. Because we could also define rapid-acting insulin within that, even though it wasn't a question asked. I think it's going to be a piece of that fear of insulin.
I put it before because I can see myself talking a lot about basal in there. And
correct.
I just think that basal gets ignored by everybody.
It does.
Yeah.
It gets ignored by everybody, except it's the first place that most clinical people adjust first.
Yeah. They just don't.
Let's throw some more basal here. You're high here. Let's just put some more basal insulin in here. Yeah, probably not. But
so I'm starting to work backwards. I put journaling and family towards the end.
Correct.
Insurance, I'm going to put towards the end. We can rejigger these as we need to. Technology and supplies. That one.
I might put that with maybe before or after insurance.
Before or after insurance. Okay. Being diagnosed as an adult.
That might actually, I'm wondering if that wouldn't be too bad to put after honeymoon.
Yeah, so that everybody can feel like they're a part of the series as it comes out, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And because being diagnosed as an adult, you may actually have a more pronounced honeymoon. Mm-hmm. You may have more of a real honeymoon, depending on how you learn to manage things from the get-go.
Right.
So I think that's good there.
And then we have left flexibility, school, and exercising. So I would think I'd like to put flexibility at least in front of, I think flexibility and stacking right before, right before guilt and fears might be valuable.
Correct.
School and exercise. So now school's interesting because I haven't read them yet, but I'm going to guess that a lot of these questions were about, hey, how do I just send my kid to school 5 minutes after they have diabetes?
Right.
So I don't know about that. And exercising is kind of the same thing. You see people get sedentary after they're diagnosed because they don't know what to do.
Well, and I think school and exercise are something, although some of these are as well, but they're more visible variables. Mm-hmm. School is a variable, exercising is a variable. So choices. Maybe right after school and exercise, or right after flexibility, put school and exercising.
Okay.
Because those both really do require some flexibility in what your typical management style would look like. Mm-hmm. So.
All right. You see what I'm doing now?
Yes.
I'm going to put them in an easier to look at format. All right. Well, this should keep us busy.
Mm-hmm. Along with all the other things that you had us scheduled out to do for the rest of the year, right?
Well, I'm gonna put an end to Ask Scott and Jenny, because the thing about those that are great is they can just go somewhere. They're really valuable. They don't need to be attached to anything else. They're great standalone episodes,
right?
So basically, at the moment, I have about 3 Ask Scott and Jenny episodes, a couple more defining episodes. So I'll put up the definings till they're done. Then I'll put up the Ask Scott and Jenny's while we're recording these. And then when the Ask Scott and Jenny's run out, we should have enough of these to get going.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Fabulous.
All right. Neither of us can get sick or get a life.
I will promise to try not to get laryngitis again. Yes.
I was getting ready to go under for my surgery. And I said to my wife, if something should happen, hire an editor. I have like 70 episodes of the podcast that need to go up. I was actually like concerned that no one would ever hear them, you know? So,
right.
Anyway. All right. Well, thank you. This was terrific.
Yeah.
I hope people enjoyed listening to us kind of talk through the idea. I'll find out if I get notes like, could you guys not record your meetings, please?
Well, but I think it's, even if you put it up as the preliminary pro tip for honeymooning, this is what's coming. Yeah. If you are newly diagnosed, we promise we are getting to some of these big questions that you really want to know sooner than later.
8, 9, 10, I'm counting 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20. Okay. So yeah, even the way the podcast runs, usually your episodes go up like once a week on a Friday.
Okay.
You're the Friday girl. And but maybe I don't put episodes up on Thursdays, maybe so that I can get them out more timely. Maybe I'll put them up Thursday, Friday for 10 weeks, and then we can get them up a little more quickly. Okay, cool. Sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
A huge thanks to InPen from Medtronic Diabetes for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Learn more about the InPen at inpentoday.com/juicebox. I also like to thank US Med and remind you to go to usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514 to get your free benefits check. Take the T1D Exchange survey at t1dexchange.org/juicebox. The very first episode of Bold Beginnings will begin in just 1 week on Friday. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. If you'd like to be part of the Facebook group where we got all of the information for the Bold Beginnings series, it's Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes on Facebook. It's a private group, so you'll need to fill out a little bit of information, just answer some questions to prove to the algorithm you're a real person. And just like that, you'll be in and talking with 25,000 people who use insulin. Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes on Facebook. And if you're enjoying the show, please leave a rating and review in the podcast app that you're listening in now. And if you're not listening in a podcast app, please think about doing that. Following the show in a podcast app or subscribing to a show in a podcast app really does help. It helps very much. You have no idea. It raises the ranking of the show and makes it more visible to other people. So you can tell somebody about it, subscribe or follow in a podcast app, and don't forget to follow the Facebook page. That's pretty much it. I'll see you soon.